Hi there and welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video. I'm IceMan and today we are going to do another list video. Now they might not be the most popular videos out there, but you know what, they're fun to do and I think they do help people occasionally. You know, somebody can come along and go, I'm looking for a champion that does this, does that, where are they good, give me some ideas. So you know, videos like this do help people run through that sort of stuff. So let's dive into it, shall we? So today we are doing HP Heroes. Yeah, I know, it was a really intelligent name, that one. I thought long and hard about the rhyme there, you know, but we got there in the end. So anyway, all joking aside, you know, HP champions, what's great about them, you know. Right, so basically we're going to start this off with a slight rant. I have to say this. It's true for some of the defensive champions as well, but not as much, to be fair. Plarium, please sort this out. When you go through all these champions on the index, there are so many champions that are leveled as HP champions. And then you look at their kit and their damage is based off of attack or defense and attack, and not off of HP. So I've not included these champions in this list because, let's face it, they're not true HP champions. One or two of them do have an inbuilt heal or something like that, I will say, where they'll heal based on their max HP. So you want to be building the HP up high as well as, say, the attack or something. But let's face it, Plarium, it would make so much more sense if you go through and change these champions so they actually do damage based off of the main stat. Not to mention the fact that, you know, there are some that just blatantly have nothing to do with HP and they're called HP champions. In no way, shape or form do they have anything to do with HP. They don't do any damage based on HP, they don't heal off of HP, they don't do shields based off of HP, and yet you've got them listed as HP champions. Sort it out, please. Anyway, little rant aside. What's great about HP champions? Well, very similar to the defensive based champions list we did last week. HP based champions are basically the same sort of deal. For the most part, I will say HP champions more often than not tend to be more supportive rather than damage dealing, whereas I'd say there's a higher mix of damage dealing champions in with the defensive list. That's not entirely true. You know, there are HP champions that do some decent damage based off of HP, as you'll see when we go through the list. But for the most part, HP champions tend to be supportive a lot more often. And they are some good champions, but that's the good thing about them. You build them up with high HP, they're not dying. You know, or at least they're not dying quick. It's a lot harder to get them killed because you're building them up purposely with high HP. You're doing more damage with them by building up the HP as well as making them more survivable. Same thing with the defense champions. It's really useful. Now with the HP champions, there's an even better thing that you can do with them, and this is huge. I absolutely love this. Shout out to Ash. Ash is a brilliant content creator. If you haven't seen his stuff, go look him up. He does great videos, brilliant guy, and he's the guy who first really put me onto this set. Like, I looked at him and I was like, I don't know, when I first started playing the game, all those many months ago. The great thing with HP based champions is they're ideal for a shield set. Not all of them, don't get me wrong, some of them you need to build out for accuracy, whatever else, and they may have elements to their kit that would warrant putting them in something else. But for the most part, all of these HP champions, if you're building them up with high HP, they really suit putting them in a HP, in a shield set. That shield set then gives everybody on your team a shield based off of something like 30% of this champion's max HP for your whole team on every single round. That means you go into a dungeon, you go into a wave, you've got this big chunky shield to help you through at the start. Same on faction wars. You go in against a group of mobs, big shield at the start. You clear that round, even if it takes more than 3 turns, it then drops off. You go on to the next one, it comes up again. Absolutely amazing, and it makes these champions even more useful on your teams. It is really handy to have a HP based champion on any given team in a shield set, because it just provides such extra utility that you can't gloss it over. So let's get into the list, shall we? We're going to start off with the Banner Lords, and our first champion is Mr. Lord Chamfort himself. Yep, you might recognise him. He's one of the bosses that you fight on the campaign. Not a bad looking champion, a little bit dated these days, you know, compared to what they're bringing out now, but still a very cool looking champion, and he's got a very cool kit, to be fair. I've never pulled this guy. I don't have first-hand experience with him. That's true for a lot of the champions in this list, I will say, but obviously I do have experience with the game, and I've done my research, I've looked into the champions, and obviously I've been playing the game long enough to be able to read a kit and have an idea of where they're going to be good or whether or not they will be any good. It's not always true. Sometimes you need to play test a champion to get any real idea, but you know. So anyway, without further ado, he's A1 Annihilation, attacks one enemy, has a 45% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. It's not a huge percent chance, but it's on an A1, so it's really cool. You put him in a team with counter attack, or if you give him the masteries with counter attack, he's going to be using that A1 even more, and therefore we can get the decreased defense up even more. Attacks all enemies on his A2 Earthshaker. So you got a nice AoE, places a 50% decrease accuracy debuff and a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. Now, this guy is actually viable to solo Nightmare campaign. You heard me right, solo Nightmare campaign. Some other content creators have done some great videos on this stuff. Murder Inc. I think was one of them. Did a really cool video on this guy just soloing campaign. Now we look at the situation we're in these days with Doom Tower out, and decrease accuracy is huge. It's big. It's going to help you stay alive in scenarios whereby these bosses have masses of accuracy, and you can build your resistance up, but it's really, they keep buffing them as well. So you know, from where we started, they've got even higher accuracy than what they started. So you've built yourself up to a really high resistance, and now you're finding that stuff's landing again. Champions like this can come in and decrease that accuracy, meaning that you don't necessarily have to rework everything and try and get your resistance up so high. So again, really solid. It's an AoE attack, does decrease accuracy, which for a long time was kind of an underutilized debuff, and now I think really has a place in the game. Decrease attack, always a brilliant ability. It can be cooled down from 4 turns to 3, and you can increase the damage. It doesn't take a lot of books, you know. 4 legendary books. You know, we've got champions with stupid amounts these days. Then we've got his A3 Thornosphere. We're doing the talking baby thing again. I do apologise. I've got to stop eating that baby food. I can't help it. It's so tasty. You know, you got to try it. You'll love it. I'm sure you will. Anyway, at the start of each turn, places a shield buff on this champion equal to 20% of their max HP for 2 turns. Will place a 15% decreased speed debuff for 1 turn on whichever enemy attacks this champion. Now, this is a really cool passive. So basically, it's on a 2-turn cooldown. You put a book into it, it's on a 1-turn cooldown. So basically every turn he's getting a shield buff on himself equal to 20% of his max HP, which you're going to be building out high anyway. To be fair, I wouldn't even necessarily waste the book on this, because it's on a 2-turn cooldown. It lasts for 2 turns. Alright, the book would help with the decreased speed, so it might be worth it there, especially if he's getting attacked a fair bit, but you don't necessarily need to book this guy, and he's still going to be pretty solid, I think. Decreased speed's great. He's got a constant shield up, basically based on a huge health pool that you can build out. What's more to want? You know, his aura increases ally HP in dungeons by 50%, which is again is really big. This guy will be able to carry Doom Tower. Great uses. He's going to carry you through content left, right, and centre, especially if you're early game, mid game. but these days he still has a solid use and place in the game, although many people have used him as a Vault Guardian for a long time. I think people are starting to wake up and realise that his kit's actually not as bad as they thought. So, moving on to our next champion, we've got Black Knight. So, Black Knight here, interesting looking champ. He kind of looks like a weird mixture of a knight and an Arab or something with the headpiece. I can't quite figure it out personally. It definitely looks more like an Arabic sort of headpiece or something going on. Again, very old school, been in the game probably since its inception, if not far off, I'd imagine. His A1 heavy blow attacks one enemy and has a 75% chance of placing provoke debuff for 1 turn. Again, provoke is actually very useful now in Doom Tower. In certain places, 75% is pretty solid. If you take the right mastery, you could actually get that up to 80 if you really want. So he's going to help you out there. The damage is based on HP, so again, you build up his HP, you build up his damage. And I'm not going to keep saying that on this video, that is the motif all the way through. Champions that are called HP champions that do damage based off of attack or defense, I have actually left out of this list because as far as I'm concerned, they're not really HP champions. Okay, then we've got Lower Visor. His A2 places a 15% continuous heal buff and a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Are there champions out there that do better ones? There's even some epics that do ones on par with this, to be fair, these days. But this can be booked down to a 2-turn cooldown. So effectively, you can have this up all the time again. Increased defense and a 15% continuous heal on all allies, including himself, all the time. Yeah? That again is huge, it's big, it's useful, it's going to help you get through content. And that is the main thrust of all these champions. Last Breath is A3, attacks all enemies, another AoE attack. Say another AoE attack, that's not an AoE attack. His only AoE attack, if I learn how to talk right, attacks all enemies, damage increases according to the amount of HP this champion has lost. So he loses a big chunk of HP, you build him with a load of HP, if he takes a load he then hits harder. The only bad thing with this ability, this one is based off of HP, this one is really strange. Attacks all enemies, damage increases according to the amount of HP the champion's lost, but then the damage is based on attack. This is what I mean by players need to sort this stuff out. Again, the damage should be based on HP, and according to the tooltip it's actually based on the amount of HP you've lost, so what's the deal there, you know? Does the damage really increase if you build him up with high attack? He's got a low attack base, so you're not going to want to do that if you can help it. But from what I understand, it still can hit pretty damn hard, so that works out fairly well. Now, this actually pairs really well with his A3. His passive places an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn if incoming damage exceeds 15% of his max HP in 1 attack. So on a 2-turn cooldown, but obviously it means that he can take a big chunk of damage, he'll put the unkillable up, he won't necessarily die, and then he can come back and do a big hit, AoE hit that's going to do a load of damage. It's not the easiest thing to get to work necessarily, but again, a good solid ability, a good solid champion. Is he one of the top tier S tier champions out there? No, many of these aren't, but for anybody that isn't sitting on a vault or pool full of epic legendary champions left, right and centre, these champions are still going to be really useful and really helpful if you pull them on your account. Okay, moving on, we have our next legendary. There we go. Lugan the Steadfast. So, Lugan attacks one enemy, heals all allies by 25% of the damage inflicted, places a shield buff on this champion equal to 10% of their max HP for 2 turns. You don't necessarily want to put this out. He heals on his A1. So that's great with counter-attack champions. If you get counter-attacking his masteries, things like that, he's going to be coming back, he's going to be healing all of your allies, and he's going to be putting a shield on himself for 2 turns. That's pretty solid, very good. Again, it's the sort of thing that he could be used quite handily to get you through Scarab King, because he's going to be regularly putting out a shield there on himself. And to be fair, anywhere else in Doom Tower he's likely to help you. To be fair, he's definitely going to help you in Faction Wars. I don't have him. He's actually quite a solid champion. Again, overlooked a fair bit, I think. His A2 Bodyguard places a 60% increased defense on this champion for 3 turns. Also places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns. This is on a 4-turn cooldown when booked, 5 if not. You know, it's not always going to be up, but it is still a very solid ability. He gets the increased defense. He's got a high HP pool, plus he's healing himself with his A1, and then he's also protecting all your allies, so he's a really good support champion. Mark of Silence attacks all enemies, has an 80% chance, 100 when booked, of placing a block cooldown skills debuff for 2 turns. Block cooldown is an actually solid ability. You know, it basically means that people are only going to be coming at you with their A1s and not using all these other abilities on you. It's on a 4-turn cooldown, lasts for 2, so you can have this up about 50% of the time, which is still very solid and going to help you on a lot of content. Again, this guy's got an aura, increases ally HP and faction crypts by 38. He'd definitely be a very useful champion for faction crypts. Next up, we are moving down to the epics. There's not a lot of choice here. I'm not a huge personal fan of this champion, but he can do some work. The looks, again, I'm not a huge fan of, to be fair. Lunge is A1, attacks 1 enemy 2 times, so this can make him viable for the finite. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing the stun debuff for 1 turn. This chance increases to 100% if the target has increased speed buff, which, you know, you come across a fair bit. For an A1, it's fairly solid, an okay chance to stun. With 2 hits, you know, it's not bad, it's not amazing, but it's a solid usable A1. Aegis is A2, places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except for this champion for 2 turns. Places a shield buff on this champion equal to 40% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. This buff cannot be removed, so you cannot take it off. It's on a 6-turn cooldown, can be booked down to 4. Again, it's a solid support ability that will help you get through content. And that's generally true for most of these champions. That's the way a lot of them are built. You could have argued the same for defense, but with the defense champions, a lot of them seem to be more damage orientated as well as being defensive. Not all of them, but many of them. With the HP ones, they definitely seem to be more support based to their kit, but again, they're doing extra damage based on the very thing that helps them support, so you know, you can't knock it. Coup de Grace is A3, attacks 1 enemy, places an extra hit if the target has a stun debuff. Obviously he's placing that stun possibly from his A1. The extra hit is always critical, which is good. Steals 50% of the target's turn meter if they are not under stun debuff. Now, this just says steals, it doesn't say has a chance to, anything like that. It might even be worth not building him out with any accuracy and not landing those stuns, and then you're going to be stealing 50% of the target's turn meter, which is actually very solid, to be fair. Again, not a terrible champion, not one of my favourites. I don't personally use him. Having looked at his kit again, I'd maybe rethink that for my Faction Wars. Although I think I'm fairly happy for Faction Wars, because I mean, as you can see, I've actually got a couple of Septimuses, I've got Cillian here, you know, I've got Stag Knight, so I've got a fairly solid team, and then a couple of support champs. I must admit, I really wouldn't mind Ursula the Mourner. Give me a reviver on this team, that would be very nice, boost things up. And have we got anybody else? Yep, we've got a rare champion that we're going to look at here. Steadfast Marshal. I kind of actually like the look of this guy. He looks a bit sort of mean. His armour looks a bit more fierce for some reason. A1, Thunderous Wallop, attacks one enemy has a 50% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn if the target's max HP is lower than this champion's. Again, you build them out with high HP, so you've got a reasonable chance of getting a provoke off on day 1. It is only a single target, so that's why I'm not a huge fan of it. Places a 60% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns and grants an extra turn on his A2. Again, it's a selfish ability, and this is why I'm not a fan of this guy. The only saving grace with this champion, I feel, is this A3. Covered retreat places a veil buff on all allies except for this champion for 2 turns. So if you've got champions out there that use veils, this guy will do that for you. It can be on a 3-turn cooldown, lasts for 2, so you can have it up a fair amount at a time. That's pretty solid, and for a rare champion, a bit more accessible. If you need somebody with veil, this guy can do it for you. And I believe that's probably it for this faction. Now, the High Elves actually have 0 HP based champions. I don't think they've even got any HP based champions that are called HP champions that just don't use HP, but so the Sacred Order, they're actually fairly stacked for some decent ones. We're going to start off with Roshkard the Tower. Brilliant champion. I've done a guide on this chap. If you want to go check it out, it will be posted over there. He's not the most amazing or exciting champion in the game in many respects. I actually have him on my ult, not my main, but he allows for an unkillable team. It's A1, attacks 1 enemy and has a 50% chance of removing 1 random buff from the target. It's not an amazing A1, it's okay, and again it's based on attack, not HP, which I think is ridiculous. This again needs to be changed. He should be doing all his damage based off of HP. He's supposed to be a HP based champion. The only reason he's actually in this list, regardless of that, is the fact that he actually does do damage based on HP on his A2, and this ability actually hits pretty solidly as well. Attacks 1 enemy, places a block cooldown skills debuff and a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. These buffs cannot be resisted, so you don't need to build him out with accuracy for that. You do need him built out for your accuracy if you want him stealing buffs on his A1, but you need to decide, are you that worried about him stealing the buffs? If you're happy enough with him doing this and doing a shield, then you don't need to build him out for accuracy, which means you can put those stats elsewhere, into higher HP for instance. Again, another great candidate for a HP set, will help carry you through things. Is A3, Zone of Protection, places a block damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. It's on a 4-turn cooldown when booked, and it's definitely worth booking. 6 turns is quite a long time. This actually rolls around quicker than you think, and it gives you a lot of protection. Great for the arena. I actually do use him in the arena for 3v3 at least, for solid support. He will help carry you through content. I'm going to clear that frog out of my throat. Not to be confused with that frog right there. No, I didn't just cough him out of my throat. I promise I didn't. I do not sit there with a frog actually sat in my throat all the time, normally. Anyway, yeah, he's great. He can be used for unkillable comps. Real solid carry. Will help you through a lot of content. His aura increases ally HP in all battles by 33%. So that's really solid. Again, it's all battles, which I like. I really like those auras. Yeah, an all-around good champion. Nobody says a lot about him, but he's mostly known for his unkillable comps, but he is useful in other places to help you get through content. Next up we have Santa Claus, Sir Nicholas himself. Probably the most famous, if not one of the most famous HP based champions in the game. This guy is a beast, an absolute beast. I don't have him, I really wish I did. He looks really cool. Kind of looks a bit like Kurt Russell's version of Santa Claus from the movies. What do you think? I think they almost modelled him on him, except for the fact that I think this chap came out before those films. I'm not sure about that one. Great films though, worth watching. So, he's A1. He is a Void legendary. hard to get, we know that, hence why I still don't have him. His A1 Boreal Blade attacks one enemy and has a 50% chance of placing a freeze debuff for one turn. This debuff cannot be resisted, so that's really solid. You've got a freeze that doesn't need any accuracy. His A2 attacks all enemies, is an AoE, places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. The value of the shield is equal to 30% of the damage inflicted, and this guy can hit. This is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. You can book the damage out as well. He's a big solid hitter, he can give you a big solid shield. Many people compare his shield to Miscreated Monster, it's that good. So if you haven't got Miscreated Monster and you got this chap, you can do you really solid for support in, say, Spider's Den. Obviously he can really help you out. It's on a 4-turn cooldown, 3-1 book, like we say. He could help you out in the Scarab King, definitely, because he's going to put shield up on a lot of people. And again, this chap can be used in unkillable teams, which is great. So he places an unkillable buff and a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. So this guy brings masses of support and masses of damage and some control as well. You can't knock that. I mean, he is absolutely brilliant. And moving on, we have Hope. I almost left her out of this video because, quite frankly, I don't think she's that great a champion, but that's my opinion on her, and I thought I should at least run through her kit, tell you what she's like, tell you what she has on offer, and let you decide if she's worth building out on your account. I certainly wouldn't advise you to, and that's not what I'm saying, but listen to what we say about her kit and then see what you think. Her looks are actually pretty solid. Her kit actually sounds solid, but for some reason I've never really gotten her to do much. Her A1 attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. Her A2 increases the duration of buffs on all allies by 1 turn, places a shield buff equal to 25% of this champion's max HP on all allies for 2 turns. Again, a pretty solid champion, I'd say, for Scarab King. You can't get any books on this, so it's only going to be up 50% of the time. That's the only negative, and that's not ideal. But you pair her with another champion that's in a similar boat, and you've got a good chance of keeping those shields up and keeping the Scarab King from wailing out on you. So, you know, not bad. And it's 25% of the champion's max HP, which is a pretty solid number, to be fair. Build her out with that high HP, you're going to get a fairly solid shield. I think she was actually buffed not that long ago. Her A3, Holy Storm, attacks all enemies and has a 50% chance of removing all buffs. So she's got buff removal. She's got buff extension on your team. I mean, like I say, the kit sounds really decent. I've just never found her that great for some reason, or a bit lackluster. Maybe I need to fully build her out, fully ascend her, and just give her a real chance. I may do that at some point, see how it goes. But for some reason I've never loved this champion. She's got an aura increases ally HP and faction crypts by 31. But according to her kit, she should be a good solid support. And there are definitely places in the games where you could use her. Who have we got else? Now, there is Missionary, but quite frankly he's crap, and I don't know that he actually does his damage based on HP, so he's not worth talking about. And of course we've got the new champion to the game, Lodric Falconheart. And let's take a look at his kit, shall we? A1 attacks one enemy, 40% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. That's pretty solid, decrease attack for 2 turns. On an A1, you can't really knock that, and you can actually get the buff up to, what, 50-60%, so that's pretty solid. His A2 removes all debuffs from one ally, then places a 50% ally protection buff on that ally for 2 turns. I'm not a big fan of abilities like this, they are a bit selfish, and I prefer people that... There's so many people out there that do similar abilities but do it for the whole team. So, given the opportunity, I'll always take those over somebody like this. Selfish abilities just don't excite me or make me want to put them on the team, quite frankly. There's no I in team, as they say. Falcon Wings is A3, places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns, equal to 20% of this champion's max HP. The good thing here is it's on a 4-turn cooldown, but can be booked down if you put the books in him. It does take a fair few books here, 6 books, to get it down to a 2-turn cooldown. So effectively, this guy can keep that shield buff up all the time. So he is really solid for the Scarab King at the very least, and may well help you out in other areas of the game. I mean, this is his one saving grace, I feel. This one ability makes him actually half decent. Other than that, he wouldn't have even made it on this list, quite frankly. And I believe we have one more here. Yeah, we have another rare. This guy actually does get talked about a lot. He's a very cool champion. I've seen videos of people using, say, him and Vergis and whatnot, doing Scarab King for a rare. Alright, he is a void rare, but he's A1, attacks one enemy, heals the ally with the lowest HP by 7.5% of the damage inflicted. It's not a massive heal. You can book it out and increase that heal, to be fair, by another 10%, so that's 17.5%, which is actually pretty decent. Rare books are harder to get these days since they made some changes to the game, but again, being a rare, you may be able to book him out that little bit easier. Sacred Wards places a shield buff on all allies equal to 15% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. Again, you can even buy the books, to be fair, from the 3v3 Bazaar, so definitely easier to book. Places a shield buff on all allies equal to 15% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. It's on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. The shield can actually go up by a further 15%, so it's a 30% of this champion's max HP as a shield on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. That's actually really, really solid, really good champion. I've built him up so far, I just haven't quite pushed him right up, and I think I need to maybe make him priority, because he is a really solid champion. Order of Mercy is A3, attacks one enemy, removes all debuffs from the ally with the lowest HP, then heals them by 25% of the damage inflicted on a 4-turn cooldown. So he's got shields, he's got lots of heals. Absolute solid support, this guy, really love him. And that's it for the Sacred Order. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my content, and you'll be notified when the next video comes out. Bye.